The protests held by Memphis sanitation workers of 1968 helped break the physical barrier of slavery and the social barrier of African American equal rights. To prove that, I'll tell you how and what the workers and people of Memphis, Tennessee had to do to win the strikes against the city and business owners. The Memphis sanitation worker strike started after two of the workers, Cole and Eckel, were crushed and killed by a garbage truck malfunction February 1st, 1968. The Memphis sanitation workers had to work under any condition: rain, snow, thunder, anything. That's what caused Cole and Eckel's death. The two sanitation workers were trying to hide from the horrible rain in the back of their garbage truck when the rain caused an electrical switch malfunction which turned on the compactor, crushing the two to death. After that, the sanitation workers of Memphis, Tennessee snapped. They started their strikes for more pay, less racism, abuse, discrimination, and safer working conditions. The working conditions during that time were horrible, dragging heavy tubs of garbage that usually had holes in them, leaving maggots under their clothes and in their boots. And here's a video where Elmore Nickelberry, one of the sanitation workers from the 1960s, will be telling you more about the horrible working conditions.
My working condition, when I get to work in the morning time, I get a number 3 tub and carry it out, put it on the truck. When I get to my route, I put the number 3 truck in my arm and go back in people's backyard and pick up garbage and bring it out on my head and load it up on the truck. My bag was in my shoes and in my clothes because I had a tub, a number 3 tub to put on my head. And when I had a tub, I dumped the barrel and put it in the tub. Maggots running all down my back, and I couldn't ride the bus. I had to walk home. My thoughts with sanitation, because we didn't have a place to clean up, nowhere to shower and nothing like that. And I thought that's what we should do, go on strike.
No paid overtime or sick leave. If someone were injured during work, that worker could be fired. The workers had had enough. February 12th, 1968, about 1,100 of the 1,300 sanitation workers of Memphis refused to go into work, demanding that the city recognize their union and negotiate to resolve the problem of them being treated unfairly and wrong. The strike was led by garbage collector turned union organizer T.O. Jones and supported by the president of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME. But after that strike, James Lawson, one of the chairmen of the strike committee, then asked his friend Martin Luther King Jr. to join and lead the strike.
James said it's because the sanitation workers' strike was a natural fit with his new mission, Poor People's Campaign. Martin flew to Memphis on March 18th and gave a speech to over 25,000 people at the Bishop Charles Mason Temple. He held his first strike in Memphis on March 28th. And here's an audio recording of Rev. George Turks Jr. talking about his thoughts of the strike at this point.
When the sanitation workers walked off the job, I remember the march down Main Street, and I couldn't understand why all of the black men had signs saying, "I am a man." And I'm going, okay, we know you're a man, you know. And my father at the time was working for Memphis Light, Gas, and Water. And I remember asking my father, why did they need those signs? And he said, they're not being recognized as men. He said, even on my job, my supervisor is 20-some years old. He said, I'm 40-something. And he called me boy, and I have to call him mister. You know, and I'm going, but why? He said, well, as you get older, it'll all become clear to you. He's just hard to explain now at your age, you know.
Sadly, when the strike hit Main Street, a fight broke out. Over 200 of the protesters started breaking storefront windows and looting. Here's another audio recording from this time. Ella Owens talking about the physical strike.
Downtown to participate in the march. And my mother's brother owned a printing shop at 220 Hernandez Street Claiborne Temple was on the end of that street, and that was where everything began, all the meetings and all the plans, and they would start from Claiborne Temple and walk down to Beale and on up to Main to the City Hall. That was the plan. Mm-hmm. At this particular time, when we started walking down, they said, go back, because some young men had decided that when they got on Main Street, they were going to start breaking all the glass out of the store window. They told us to go back to to Claiborne Temple. But we went to the shop because, it was my uncle's shop. It was right in between there. Well, when we got in the shop and people were running down to the temple, the police had started macing people and beating them with nightsticks. And my mother and my uncle, her brother, walked out on the sidewalk, and they were standing there watching. And a policeman was coming down the street, and he told them, get inside. They turned very slowly, and with dignity and courage, they just took their time walking into the shop, letting him know in many ways, body language and many other languages, they did not appreciate what was being done, nor his actions.
They had another strike the next day, March 29th. Around 300 sanitation workers and ministers marched peacefully and silently from Claiborne Temple to City Hall. The strikers were escorted by guardsmen with bayonets, 5 armed personal carriers, 5 jeeps, and 3 Hume military trucks. At City Hall, President Johnson and AFL-CIO President George Meany helped to resolve the dispute, but Mayor Leob turns them down. Martin Luther King decides to cancel his trip to Africa and return to Memphis to lead another protest as an attempt to make up for his first strike that failed. April 3rd, 1968, at Mason Temple, Memphis, Tennessee, Martin gave his "I've Been to the Mountaintop" speech to the crowd. Here's a small part of the audio recorded from his speech.
I left Atlanta this morning, and as we got started on the plane, there were 6 of us. The pilot said over the public address system, "We are sorry for the delay, but we have Dr. Martin Luther King on the plane, and to be sure that all of the bags were checked, and to be sure that nothing would be wrong on the plane, we had to check out everything carefully, and we've had the plane protected and guarded all night." And then I got into Memphis, and some began to say the threats, or talk about the threats that were out. What would happen to me from some of our sick white brothers? Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind.
The next day, he was shot and killed. Miss King and dozens of Memphis sanitation workers marched in memory of Martin Luther King Jr., and funeral services were held in Atlanta, Georgia. Tuesday, April 16th, AFSCME leaders announced an agreement has been reached and the strike is now over. The settlement includes union recognition and wage increase. Additional strikes did have to be threatened to force the city to uphold the agreements. But in the end, African American Sanitation Workers Union has been recognized.